When you think of shoplifting, what comes to mind? Probably petty thieves, right? Maybe some teenagers on a dare. But what's going on in the UK right now? Well, it's something else entirely. We're talking about a full-blown national crisis. It's being fueled by organized crime, systemic failures, and it is literally changing the face of British high streets. Okay, let's get into it.
So, first things first, let's just try to get our heads around the sheer scale of this. Last year, in UK convenience stores alone, we're looking at an estimated 5.8 million incidents of theft. I mean, just let that number sink in. 5.8 million. It's absolutely staggering. And here's the kicker. That's just one piece of a much, much bigger and often hidden puzzle.
And this is where the story starts to get, really complicated. Okay, so on one hand, the police officially recorded about 500,000 shoplifting offenses. But on the other hand, you ask the retailers, they say they experienced over 5.5 million incidents. The real story isn't just the numbers themselves, it's the massive gaping chasm between them. That discrepancy, it's not just a spreadsheet error. It points to something much more serious, a catastrophic loss of faith in the system. You've got retailers who've basically just given up reporting crimes they believe are just going to go nowhere.
So who's behind all this? Who's committing these millions and millions of thefts? Well, you can forget those old stereotypes. We are now dealing with a whole new kind of adversary, someone far more sophisticated and, frankly, professional. Look, this is straight-up organized crime, and they're running it like a business. These gangs have created what's essentially a steal-to-order system. They're targeting specific, high-value items. We're talking everything from premium booze and makeup to, get this, Lego and Barbie dolls. They're casing the joints, analyzing store layouts, planning escape routes, and then they use online marketplaces to flip the stolen goods for cash fast. It's systematic, it's efficient, and you better believe it's incredibly lucrative.
And don't just take my word for it. The British Retail Consortium, the BRC, they put it really bluntly. This isn't random anymore. It's a coordinated assault on the whole retail sector. And the cost? When you factor in all that unreported crime, we're talking losses well over £2 billion a year.
But this isn't just about the money. Not even close. There's a huge human cost here. Think about this. Every single day in the UK, retail workers face around 1,600 incidents of verbal abuse or violence. That breaks down to about 118 physical assaults and 36 incidents involving a weapon. Every single day. I mean, let's be clear. This epidemic of theft has turned a regular job into a terrifying and dangerous one.
Now, a crisis like this doesn't just pop up out of nowhere, right? It was allowed to happen. In fact, you could even say it was encouraged by some pretty critical failures within the UK's legal and policing systems.
So yeah, that's the big question, isn't it? How on earth did it get this bad? How did we get to a point where thieves can just brazenly walk into a shop and walk out with bags of stuff like it's a normal Tuesday? Well, the answer, it's a perfect storm, really. A mix of legal loopholes and just not enough resources to go around.
Okay, so right at the heart of this whole mess was this one little clause in the law called Section 22A. And what it did was basically say that any theft under 200 quid was just a minor summary offense. It was like a giant signal to both the police and the criminals that, hey, this stuff isn't a big priority. And you can bet the gangs learned how to play that system. They'd meticulously keep their hauls just under that 200-pound limit in one store, then hit another and another. They were racking up huge profits with almost zero risk. It basically became a license to steal.
And the results of that loophole? They're pretty stark. A jaw-dropping 55% of all reported shoplifting cases are just closed. No suspect ever identified. The number of people actually charged? It's hovering below 20%. So for a criminal, the whole risk versus reward calculation just completely fell apart. The odds were stacked way, way in their favor.
And then you've got the other massive piece of the puzzle. The police are just stretched incredibly thin. I mean, they're forced to prioritize the most serious, high-harm crimes. Things like domestic abuse, sexual offenses. So shoplifting, it just naturally falls to the bottom of the pile. And it's not that the police don't care. It's that they are completely overwhelmed. They simply can't cope with the demand.
But what's really interesting is that this crime wave isn't happening the same way everywhere. It's not uniform across the country at all. When you actually map it all out, you start to see this story of two Britons. You have different regions becoming hotspots for completely different reasons.
So if you look at the data, the national average for shoplifting is around 7 incidents for every 1,000 people. But then you look at these hotspots, places like Durham and East Sussex, and that rate jumps to over 11. Numbers like that are a pretty clear signal that something very different is going on in these specific places.
And the stories behind those numbers couldn't be more different. So, Take Durham, up in the Northeast. The high rates there are closely linked to things like poverty, the decline of industry, drug addiction. It creates this environment where organized gangs can easily exploit low-level thieves. But then you go down to East Sussex, on the wealthy South Coast, and it's a totally different story. The problem there is the organized gangs themselves traveling into the area specifically to target high-value goods in these affluent towns. Which brings us to a really fascinating paradox, because the #1 hotspot for shoplifting in the entire UK, it's not a deprived area. Not at all. It's Kensington and Chelsea, one of the absolute richest boroughs in London. The rate there is nearly 19 incidents per 1,000 people. So, why? How does that even make sense? Well, criminology actually has a pretty simple answer for this. It's called routine activity theory, and it says that for a crime to happen, you just need 3 things to come together at the same time. Think of it like a recipe. Ingredient number 1, a motivated offender, someone who wants to steal. Ingredient 2, a suitable target. And let's be honest, Kensington is packed to the gills with luxury goods. And ingredient number 3, the absence of a capable guardian. With store staff told not to intervene and the police stretched so thin, you've basically got the perfect recipe for crime.
Okay, so the sheer scale of this crisis has finally forced a response. The government and the police are now starting to roll out a brand new playbook, and they're starting with a major legislative counterattack.
There is a new crime and policing bill, and it tackles this whole crisis head-on in 3 key ways. First, it gets rid of that 200-pound loophole completely. Poof, gone. Now all theft is treated seriously. Second, it creates a brand new, specific offense for assaulting a retail worker, and it comes with tougher penalties. And third, it makes it a lot easier to ban serial offenders from even setting foot in certain retail areas. The bottom line is, the system is finally getting some teeth.
But of course, new laws by themselves aren't enough, so the police strategy has had to evolve too. And this is where something called Operation Opal comes in. Think of it as a national intelligence unit that brings together police data and all the information from major retailers. And its one and only job? To map, track, and dismantle the organized crime gangs that are driving this whole epidemic.
And you know what? The early results are actually really promising. For the repeat offenders that Operation Opal identifies and targets with this new intelligence-led approach, their reoffending rate has dropped by an incredible 73%. That is a massive deal. This data-driven strategy is proving to be a seriously powerful weapon in this fight.
So, let's just quickly pull all that together. We started with a legal loophole and policing gaps that basically fueled the rise of these organized steal-to-order gangs. That exploded into a massive crime wave that hit different parts of the country for different reasons, creating both a human and an economic crisis. But now, a combination of new laws and smarter, intelligence-led policing seems to be, finally, starting to turn the tide.
Which, of course, leaves us with one last, really crucial question. The fight back has definitely begun. The strategy is smarter and tougher than it's ever been. But with these criminal networks so deeply entrenched, are these new measures actually going to be enough to reclaim the high street for good? Or are we just at the beginning of a whole new, and maybe even more complex chapter in the battle against retail crime?